So, hello everyone and welcome to another video. And in the trend of making various videos about the GTX 260 OC challenge, I'm now making, one of those. So, today we are talking about software tweaks, specifically the LOD tweak. Tessellation tweak only works on AMD cards, so we're not going over that today because we are using GTX 260s. I will make a video about tessellation sometime later, or if it should become relevant anytime. But we are going to go into the LOD tweak today, and also some other tweaks that you can make to get more performance out of your card. So the first thing I'm going to do is just run Tropics with our competition settings to give you an idea of what the full stock performance is, because this is a completely fresh Windows 10 Superlight install from Ghost Spectre. So this is a customized install that is lighter and more performance friendly. So if you want this, Ghost Spectre has a YouTube channel. Find that channel, look up their video about the Windows 10. They also have a Windows 11 Superlight, and the description will give you instructions on how to download and install it. It's a bit complicated. They have like a password that you need to put in, which is in the video description. But once you have it, you can install this, and this will perform, in my experience, it performs about as well as Windows 7. But it really depends on what card you have. For some cards it's the same as Windows 7, for some cards it's still a bit worse. But if you can't get Windows 7 to work on your machine because there are sometimes driver issues, this is pretty much your best bet. So I'm just gonna let Tropics finish its run here, and then we're going to take a look at the full stock results. I haven't even installed MSI Afterburner on this system. The card is completely stock. I also didn't touch any driver settings, so this is what you would get if you just plug the card in and go. So, we have our result. So we got exactly 49 FPS and a score of 12,033. 1233. 12,000 would be cool. And yeah, I have seen much better scores than that at the same clocks. So yeah, there will be a lot of extra performance that we can gain here. So let's go into our first tweak, which will be the LOD tweak. I've written down the numbers, so you don't need to remember them. And yeah, so to activate the LOD tweak, we need to access some hidden driver settings. That's what we need Nvidia Inspector for. Specifically Nvidia Profile Inspector.exe. Sometimes you get a combo version of Nvidia Inspector. You just click on this, that starts the Profile Inspector if you don't have a dedicated exe file for it. Or you can just click on this and that also starts the Profile Inspector. And what you want to do is go down to anti-aliasing and find anti-aliasing transparency supersampling and set it to either AA mode, replay mode all, or any of the sparse grid supersampling options. In my experience, AA mode, replay mode all performs a bit better, but there have been reports that the sparse grid super sampling sometimes perform a little better. Any of these four options will enable you to use the LOD tweak. So since I prefer the AA mode, replay mode all, I'm going to select that. You can of course experiment and see what performs better for you and then use that. And then when we have either AA mode or any of these sparse grid super sampling options selected here, this setting will now be active. So this is texture filtering LOD bias DirectX. And Right now it is at +0, because what LOD does, it is a performance technique where the card can get a little bit more performance by rendering objects that are really far away in a scene at a lower texture resolution. And what we can do with this setting is make the card treat everything that's on screen as if it is really, really far away, and therefore render it at a lower texture resolution. So that's what our value does. Now if you go into this drop-down menu, you see that the maximum that we can set is +3. We can apply that, that will be fine, and that will give us some extra score. However, +3 is in most cases actually not what you want. +3 is the thing you want in 3D Mark Firestrike, for example. But in other benchmarks, you want up to 27. And the drop-down menu only goes to 3. So, how do you get more? That's where a little file comes in. That is very useful. So let's go to my test bench USB stick and find it. It should be somewhere in here. Yeah, here it is. So, this file right here, let's get a bit smaller, shows you the hex values, so this value back here, for some different LOD levels. Because you can also just type in an actual hex value, so 0x000000, let's say 78. And this will apply. You see that this value has now changed to whatever we typed in. And now we have an LOD setting of 15 applied. So this is how you can get more LOD settings. And if you want to know what 27 is, there's actually a scheme to this. So you see how, if we ignore the 0.5 options, you see how it always goes 28, 30, 38, 40, 48, 50, 58, 60, 68, 70, 78. So it alternates between 0 and 8 and then always goes up another number. So like 16 will be 80, and then 17 will be 88, and then 18 will be 90, and so on. So that's pretty easy to figure out. So this way you can get any LOD setting that you want. So we're gonna go 15, because 15 is what was recommended to me to run for Unigine Heaven, and since Unigine Tropics is kind of similar to Heaven, my assumption is that this will work pretty well for Tropics as well. Of course, there will have to be experimentation. LOD is kind of fiddly. There is a sweet spot for it. If you give it too little, you don't get as much of a boost, and if you give it too much, you can actually get into a situation where your performance degrades. So when it comes to LOD, there can be a lot of sweet spot finding and a lot of tweaking. So you can spend a lot of time on this. So yeah, if you ever feel like you have too much free time, you can do this. And what you will see right away, once we get a little bit closer to the island in the benchmark, is that now all the textures are very washed out, almost as if every texture has just become solid. You can also see the trees are somewhat transparent now. That is what the LOD tweak does. If we come close to the... yeah, you can see right now the wood texture is basically gone. The water is now just a blue mass with some waves in it. So the LOD tweak is definitely active. In some benchmarks it looks even worse. For example, in Firestrike, your entire image just becomes totally blurred because there's some foreground texture that also gets blurred by this. So there are worse examples than this. In some benchmarks you also, like, your FPS counter disappears, which this suddenly still thankfully still exists. And yeah, so we're gonna let this run to the end and see what a LOD level of 15 brings us in terms of score. So we have a result. We have gone from 49 FPS to 51.9 FPS. So that's almost 2 FPS more, and our score has gone from 1233 to 1308. So that's a pretty decent increase already. And this is only from one LOD level, so there is a lot of testing that can be done here about which LOD level is actually optimal, and also like which of the anti-aliasing settings might be a little bit faster. I'm not going to spend much time here to test all that. This is just to show how to activate it and what kind of performance increase you can about expect from it. So let's go to the next couple things. The next thing, and we're really just going to rapid fire this, I don't want to run the benchmark too many times. We go into the Nvidia control panel. So we go to Manage 3D Settings, and here we can set texture filtering to high performance. You can technically set this to single display performance mode. I don't think this really does anything, but maybe it does. And the funny thing about this is these cards don't actually have a power consumption setting. So on newer cards you can set preferred maximum performance in the power consumption setting thing. This card doesn't have that. So we set high performance, and I guess you can set this if you want. And that's pretty much everything in 3D settings. And then we can go here and set this to performance as well and apply that again. So that would be the tweaks that we can do in the Nvidia driver. And then there's a few more things that we can do in Windows. So we can go into adjust the appearance and performance of Windows and set this to adjust for best performance. And then also, it doesn't show it again, power plan here. Choose a power plan. We can set this to high performance. However, since this is Windows 10 Ghost Spectre, we have this thing called the Ghost Toolbox. So we can start this, because this thing has a few extra things that we can do. It's gonna do a little check, and then we're not gonna do that update. And it should land us in a pretty big menu shortly. So here we are, and these are a lot of options, and you can change a lot of different things in this, but the thing that mostly interests us is 39, which is tweaks for gaming etc. And here we can enable a bunch of things. So we can enable the high precision event timer. Not really needed. You usually need to enable this for GPU-Z, not GPU-Z, GPU-Pi. But you know, can't hurt. Let's enable this. As you can see, there's also a few extra options if you have an AMD card. Not recommended. Yeah, let's choose option 5. Again, there can be testing here on what performs best. I just want to show that we have the option. We need to restart to apply much of this. Let's also disable the Windows 10 startup delay. And that is also gone once we restart. This is kind of dangerous. You can disable the mitigations for Spectre and Meltdown. Only for Intel CPU. I am on an Intel CPU, so I can do this. Now, I know what I'm doing, and this is a test bench OS. I'm not going to use this for any kind of daily operations. So I'm fine with disabling this. You can also enable it again. So you can disable it, do your bench, and enable it again. Though I would really recommend, if you use this on your daily PC, I would actually recommend setting up a second partition on your boot drive and installing it on that. But you do you, as you want. Then disable the lock-in screen background blur. Sure, let's do that. So that's now also gone. Enable gamer mode and ultimate performance power plan. The second part is important here because this card does not support game mode. But once we do that, we can now select ultimate performance, which is supposed to be a bit better than high performance. Now this actually is a thing that is a Like, ultimate performance is part of base Windows 10. You just can't select it, and this Ghost Toolbox makes it selectable. You don't need to have Superlight to do this. There are some other ways to get ultimate performance to apply on normal Windows 10, but the Ghost Toolbox is just very convenient, and generally this OS is very good compared to vanilla Windows 10. And then also, well, we can do 14. This card doesn't support that, but that way you would get into your hardware acceleration settings if you have a card that supports it. This one doesn't. So let's go back. We can also do a couple other things right here. As you can see right here, 42. If you have the Windows 11 edition of Superlight, there are a bunch of options in there as well. Not really performance oriented, but just want to make you aware if you want the Windows 11 edition. And just as you can see, there's a bunch of things here. We can also like do things like change our page file, and then just other things that can be quite useful. But for now, we're basically done here, and let's restart to apply all of those changes. And then we can test it again, and then we will hopefully see another very nice jump in performance. So we're back on the desktop, and let's run this again. So, there we have it. We have 52.7 FPS and a score of 1327. So, it's another modest increase. So we had 49 FPS at the beginning and 51.9 after the LOD tweak. And now after all the other smaller tweaks, we now have 52.7. So if we get a calculator out, if we look at that, so our final score is 1327. Okay, so 7.62368 whatever percent more performance from simply tweaking the operating system and the software. We haven't done any actual overclocking. We've only done pure free performance software optimizations. And 7% is actually quite an interesting number, because if I remember correctly, a change greater than 7% is about where the human eye actually starts seeing a difference. So this alone is already filling up that range where like the changes don't really, you don't really notice them. We're already into the range where you will actually notice better performance now. Now, of course, that's a very general statement, and we're not really gonna game on this, but still it's interesting that we've hit just about that number where the change actually becomes like where you can feel it. And yeah, so that is what I usually use as tweaks. Now beyond this, you can also try different OSs. I haven't tried Windows 8. For some benchmarks, Windows 8 is actually the best. There's also Windows 7, which again I'm not using here because my install is only in German, and showing all the different settings would have been a bit hard. If I can, I'll try to get like an English Windows 7. Hopefully, like, there are some super light versions of Windows 7 also floating around. I just haven't managed to install any of them because they are all missing the necessary drivers for modern platforms. And I haven't been able to patch those drivers into them. So maybe I'll manage to do that, or maybe I can just find a pre-patched version somewhere and use that instead. But anyway, this is the main software tweaks that you can do as shown on our competition as an example. And should I find any other tweaks that you can do, I'll let you know. I'll make a follow-up video, but for now that's all the tweaks that I know that I usually use, and I hope this was helpful to you. So yeah, have fun, and until next time, goodbye. Okay, little addition to the end of the video. I completely forgot that this page exists, but if you go to this page, you can find this link, which will give you a modified version of Nvidia Inspector that can just set up to 27 LOD. You don't have to bother with the hex codes, you can just get this, and you will be just able to select it from the drop-down menu. And you can also see other things here, like what is recommended for what benchmarks. That's where I got the 15 number from, because they recommended for Heaven. But yeah, so this page exists. You can get that modified version of Nvidia Inspector, and then you don't have to bother with the hex values. So yeah, you can just get this under that link, and yeah, that's just gonna make things a lot easier, I think. And that'll be it. The video is really over now. Bye.